Hi friends, welcome to my third video about the Apocrypha. And so I just finished reading the entire Apocrypha. I had a mad dash to the finish because I saw the page count was getting very thin. So I recently finished it. I read it quickly so I could move on to other reading projects. Now, one thing I've said in my second video, that Jerome did not translate the entire Apocrypha. Once again, that is incorrect. Turns out what happened was Jerome integrated most of the Apocrypha into the Old Testament. And then he relegated the books from 1 Esdras up until 4 Maccabees. Yes, 1st Esdras until 4 Maccabees. He relegated that to the something called the appendix, which is in the back of the Bible. So then later editions of the Latin Vulgate, which is the Latin Bible that the Catholic Church uses, written by Jerome, later editions of the Latin Vulgate might not have included an appendix, and the English translation of English translations of Catholic Bibles might have not included the appendix. So those additional books were not included in many Catholic Bibles, but they were initially in Jerome's first edition of the Latin Vulgate when he initially translated it. Which is interesting. Meanwhile, in the East, with the Eastern Orthodox Church, they were still using the Septuagint. So the preachers were still preaching from those additional books, 1 Esdras up until 4 Maccabees. Whereas in the West, it was widely unknown, even though it was technically available for some church authorities, like the Pope, for instance. And so Joel asked me, by the way, I have it it's over here. I'm trying to get to the history books here. Here we are. This is 2nd Chronicles over here. This is Ezra. So I have Ezra Nehemiah in my Old Testament, as well as the Hebrew translation of Esther. This is Nehemiah, Esther, see? So I have both the Greek translation of Esther, which is in the Apocrypha, with additions to Esther, and I have Ezra Nehemiah, which 1 Esdras is basically a retelling of. So, glad we got that out of the way. Yeah, a lot, but not all. A lot of the Apocrypha is basically retellings of stuff that was already written in the Old Testament, similar to something like the 4 Gospels, or Samuel and Kings retold in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. So a lot of the stuff in the Apocrypha is not unique, but most of it is. But most of it is unique, but some of it isn't. That's something you should know. And turns out the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible is available in English, but it was only very recently that it was translated into English. So consider that a future reading project. I need to find the English translation of the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. Now, let's see. I got my checklist here. Oh yeah, I've read the entire Old Testament twice, and I've read the entire New Testament once. Once in the NIV and once in the NRSV for the Old Testament. I've only read the New Testament in the NIV translation. So now I need to read the New Testament in the NRSV translation. And I've already read the Apocrypha twice. Excuse me. I've already read the Apocrypha twice, but the first time was without reading the footnotes, which added very important context. Now, let's see. I'm looking at my checklist over here. Oh yeah, turns out the Septuagint is 100% Greek. So the Catholic Church was, Jerome was not using any Hebrew manuscripts, apparently, because he was translating off of the Septuagint, which is a translation as well. So the Latin Vulgate may very well be a translation of a translation. Other than except for the New Testament, of course, which was already in Greek. So it's the Hebrew translation of the Old Testament that Jerome apparently did not have. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Any proper church historians can tell me about that. Now, let's see. Is there... I'm looking at this. I'm looking at my checklist. Okay, so now I'm going to shift your attention to the book of 2 Esdras. Let me just get to it. This is 3 Maccabees here. Two Esdras. I'm going to flip through the pages because 2 Esdras has a lot of interesting things in it that I have to point to. Now, 2 Esdras chapters 1 and 2, like I said before, are sometimes added or omitted depending on the sect of Christianity that you are a part of. So see, here's the end of 1st and 2nd Esdras. 1st and 2nd chapters of 2 Esdras. There's a theory in circulation that this is a forgery written in the 3rd century CE because it's very pro-Christian. It talks about the Christians replacing the Jews as God's chosen people. So similar to the longer ending of Mark, similar to the longer ending of Mark. Some people don't believe that this additional material into Esdras, the first 2 chapters, belongs in there. As does, let me just flip to it. We're still in 2 Esdras here. I'm trying to make sure here we go. As does 15 and chapters 15 and 16 of 2 Esdras also was like, depending on which sect of Christianity you're part of, they include or omit. This is also possibly a Christian forgery. It doesn't belong in there. Meanwhile, the bulk of 2 Esdras in the middle... Did I go too far ahead? Yes, I did go too far ahead. Meanwhile, the bulk of 2 Esdras in the middle, chapters 3 to 14, that's all original material written hundreds of years before Christ. Yes. 2 Esdras is a apocalyptic book similar to Daniel and Ezekiel and Revelation and Zechariah, which has all this bizarre dream sequence like images that they present, as well as prophecies about the end of the world and the restoration of God's kingdom on earth. You know? So that's what 2 Esdras largely is. Now I'm going to make... excuse me. I'm going to get to another thing I want to point out here. State of the dead before judgment. Now, in my first video about the Apocrypha, I said that this book clarifies purgatory, and in a way it does. But I learned that purgatory is more of a transitional state as opposed to a state of transforming, as opposed to God's waiting room. So what happens immediately after you die? That's what a lot of Christians think about. Some say it's soul sleep, so like you're unconscious until the end of the world, where there's the resurrection of the dead. Others say you go straight to heaven, but how does that reconcile with the resurrection of the dead? And then there's stuff about time and space, blah blah blah. What 2 Esdras specifically says, it gets into specifics of where you go immediately after you die, before the end of the world, if you die before the end of the world. And it is like, it doesn't describe a waiting room, but it describes a state of misery or happiness in the knowledge that you will receive a resurrection and be part of God's kingdom, or burn in the lake of fire for all eternity. So it's just a waiting room where you have to... so you're a ghost where you're you have to be conscious with that knowledge that you're doomed or that you are blessed. But it is a state of waiting. But it doesn't specifically describe a waiting room. It describes a spirit, a soul, that does not inhabit a body. Whether they're in a waiting room or they are haunting the earth, that I don't know. That it doesn't get into here. Meanwhile, purgatory in the Roman Catholic tradition is a transformative, transitional state where you're being cleansed of your sins, etc., so that you can go into heaven or whatever. It's this limbo-like state where your soul is in a transitional, transformative stage, not so much in a waiting room stage, which is what 2 Esdras describes. Okay, thank you for listening in. This is my final video about the Apocrypha. Goodbye.